Important. Hello, hello. Okay, so to start with, as I was showing you guys earlier, I'm very tired because this little shit's in my house now. Literally yesterday morning, I could barely touch her because she was like half feral. And then when I got back home, she's been like attached at the hip. I can't walk down the hall with her like without her rubbing against my feet. She's just constantly against me. And I've also got two other cats who are not happy with her existence. I just got her. She's very cute, but my two have been around together a lot longer than her, and they're not. Yeah. The big cat, he's real derpy, as you can tell. Yeah, I've got a lot of cat pictures. The big one's Otto. The little one's Toru. The new one, I'm probably calling Rosie. But yeah, the big one, he's usually pretty chill. I was surprised that he like fussed at the new one. But also today they were like drinking out of the same water bowl, so I don't think it's gonna last. The little black one though, she is very jealous and very like possessive of me. So it's gonna be a while. The reason I bring that up is I didn't get any sleep last night. Not that they were like fighting, because the little one, the new one was just up against me all night, and anytime she moved, like I woke up to make sure nothing was going on. But so if I'm a little out of it today, I apologize in advance. So that's the start of that. Let's see what other stuff we've got. Right, the first paper. Normally, I make it due right before fall break, so that'd be like the first week of September here, or November rather. Like I said, I'm tired. However, that would give you like 2 weeks before the next one's due, because there's Thanksgiving break, and then the semester's basically over. So we can't do that. So what I usually do now is I do it like, let's say mid-October. So for my Tuesday, Thursday class, I went with the 20th of October, I believe. Because that was a Thursday. So since you guys are Monday, Wednesday, it's going to have to be the 19th. October. Also, today's the 14th. You've got a month. So, I say that to say this. Here's the first topic. And I did change this. It was due like, I think the 6th of October originally. That was last semester. The times are different each semester. The default topic is basically looking at the way that the different European powers interacted with the different native groups that they came across. So that's basically chapters 1 and 2. Like I decided to go with like the earliest possible topic. If you want to use outside sources, which I suggest using. Now this means stuff outside of the book. So if you don't have the book, you've got to use outside sources. You have to use something. But give me a works cited page. Let me know where you got your stuff. If you make citations, make sure you cite them. Use MLA. Where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? There it is. use MLA style documentation, which is really simple, and your word processor should just do that for you at this point. I'm not going to go through and like check every period and comma if you do have to do it by hand. Just give me an idea of where you got your stuff. If you use quotations, which I do suggest you do because that's what we historians like to see, and that's what my brain likes now. I don't know, that's just a historian thing, I guess. If you find a good quote, use it. Just make sure you cite it. It's like, hey, so-and-so said this, here's where I got it from, and you're good. But don't like copy a whole piece from a page you found and then leave it in there like it's your work, because that's not good. Just cite. And if you get information from a place and you're not sure if you've changed the words enough, just cite it anyway. You can't oversight. That's one thing you learn as a historian. If when in doubt, just throw down a citation. It doesn't matter. Put a citation at the end of a paragraph if you got information from a thing. Just don't worry about it. And even then, I'm not going to be super harsh about it, but if like there's a whole paragraph of obviously not your writing, I'm going to ask questions. Now that said, it doesn't have to be on this. That's why I said the default topic. If you want to do anything else, like up to and including the American Revolution, cool. Feel free to. I'm going to put this up on Blackboard. It's 2 to 3 pages, double spaced, so it's not really long. So you can't literally do the American Revolution as your paper. That's too big. That's too broad. So if you want to do something besides what I have as the default topic, let me know so I can tell you if it's too broad of a topic. That's usually the biggest problem people have is they choose a topic that's just too broad and they end up not saying anything by the end of the paper. Because they're like, oh, well, I want to talk about George Washington. Cool. Be specific about what you want to talk about George Washington. Like, do you want to talk about his time as a general in, say, the 7 Years' War, or his time as a general in the Revolution, or his time as president? You can't talk about all of them in 2 to 3 pages. You can't. So yeah, but you're welcome to expand beyond. I mean, like I had a student that did, I told my other class this, I had a student that did the turtle, which was I hesitate to call it a submarine, but technically it was a submarine in the Revolutionary War. It was basically a barrel with like a corkscrew propeller, and there was one dude in it, and he like cranked it across the bay, and then it had like a drill on one end, and he like drilled it into the ship, and then like tried to put an explosive in it to set off on the ship, and it just didn't do anything. It was an awful design, but it was an interesting concept, and it was a neat read. So the reason I bring that up is, if there's something in this time period that you think is interesting, that'll be way easier for you to write and way easier for me to read than you painting by the numbers and just doing, you know, the default topic because you can't think of anything. And if you can't think of anything, that's fine. I'm not saying, you know, don't do the default topic. It's just that when I've got like 60, well, no, I've got the 2 online classes. Good God, I've got a lot of you. You know, diversity is nice when it comes to reading papers. But, you know, I'm trying not to be like, don't do the default topic, because that's why I chose the default topic. It's, if you don't know what to do, that's what it's here for. But if you have ideas and you're not sure, bring it to me. If you have ideas, bring it to me anyway, just in case. You can speak to me after class. You can email me, especially you online folks. Obviously, you got to email me. For you people here in class, please, if you can, print them out and bring them to me when the due date comes up. Well, you can print them here at the Continuum as well. Well, that's true. It is kind of a pain in the butt. if you're able to print them out, please do, because I've got 2 almost completely full online classes that are going to be emailing them to me, and I'm going to die. So, like, you can email them to me if you need to. Just send them to, like, my regular fmarion.edu email. That's fine. You're welcome to. But I've got 2 online classes that are going to be doing that as well. It's going to be a thing. I think that's all I can think of. Any questions about this?
It's really cut and dry.
Yeah, I try to be. But like I said, I've got not a lot of sleep. And then I woke up with a headache, and then I took Excedrin, and the Excedrin gave me a stomach ache, so I'm just out of it. And then I can't walk because of that damn cat. It's a good thing my house is smaller. If I had steps, I'd be dead. Just straight up. Yeah, so again, main thing is just, it's due like a little over a month from now. There's plenty of time. We'll have covered quite a bit more by then. If you're like how I was in undergrad and you want to like wait till we go over something in class before you write about it, that's cool. Obviously, it's good to kind of research it beforehand. And it doesn't have to be over something we even go over in class, as long as it's American history between like literally the people coming over the Bering Strait to the American Revolution. Like, if it's in that time period and it's American history, and you can pull in a little European history if you want, as long as it's connected to colonization, you can do that too. So that's all I got. Again, if you've got any questions or whatnot about like topics, let me know. Okay. Let's grab this and move it out the way. Grab this and move it out the way. Okay, good. Everybody into place. And like I said, I will put the topic up on Blackboard for everybody. If it's not immediately after class today, it'll at least be after classes today. Okay. Right. So let's get back to this. We finished up with the Pilgrims last time. We sort of had to rush through the end, so I'll pull this back up and we'll briefly go over it. Let me open my book, because I do like to sort of follow along in the book. Yeah, when COVID happened and we all sort of had to go home and figure out how to do online stuff from there, it was not great. I was just like sitting on my couch and doing online stuff, and I used my webcam so I could sort of like motion at the screen. We don't have the camera in here, so I can't really do it for my online folks. But Big Fat Cat Otto was constantly like going back and forth, so those students were very familiar with Otto by the end of that semester. Okay. He likes being involved. It wasn't like a Zoom call. It was just I just put it up on YouTube. So the most comments I got in the chat were when he showed up. It's like, I wonder if anybody's watching, and then Otto would show up. It's like, Kitty. It's like, okay, somebody's here. Okay. So we finished with the Pilgrims last time, discussing Samoset and Squanto and their tribal chief, Massasoit. The colder climate made it so that they weren't as decimated by disease as the colony of Jamestown was. And They therefore became more aggressive with natives that they were not friendly with, which is to say the Massachusetts tribe. And as we mentioned last time, Miles Standish was very aggressive against them, attacking a Massachusetts village, kidnapping and killing the chief and his younger brother. So the tribe scattered and went north and west, which we'll talk about the Massachusetts tribe again a little bit later. So we have the images. Miles Standish being a good, upstanding Christian man. Okay. Now, this is basically the rest of the chapter is the Puritans. So, during the 1620s, the Puritans were pushing to develop their own plantation, or their own settlement, not plantation. I was thinking Plymouth Plantation. Their own settlement. They were religious dissenters, much like the Separatists. But persecution was one of a few reasons for why they wanted to leave. Puritans, being Calvinists, saw God's hand in everything that happened. So they believed that any disaster, either natural or man-made, including like an economic disaster, was brought about by God. So anything bad that happened to England was God punishing England. Like the hate preachers we have here. It's like, oh, well, the hurricane happened because of the gays. It's like, what about when the hurricanes wiped out your mega churches? We don't talk about that. So New England was seen as a haven from God's wrath, where they could build a pure and just society away from the corruption of England. Now, again, they were very, very creative with their naming. So the Pilgrims/Separatists who wanted to separate from the Church of England, the Puritans wanted to inspire a purification of Anglicanism. Boy, I don't remember if I made these multiple choice questions, but I feel like those would be easy multiple choice questions. Hey, which was the group that wanted to purify England? Which was the group that wanted to separate from England? It's in the name. I don't remember if those were questions or not, but it'd be easy. Now, unlike the Pilgrims who left in, that itty-bitty Mayflower, the Puritans made themselves at home north of Plymouth with a fleet of 17 ships. They had families, ministers, merchants, craftsmen, and farmers. And rather than landing there by accident, they had studied the coastline and landed exactly where they wanted to. So they landed, named their new settlement Boston, which was named creatively from the port from which they left. I know that I'm wearing that joke thin, but it's always funny to me. It's like, oh, we're going to get away from England and all of their corruption. What are we going to name our new settlement? From the same place we left from? I left from Boston, they're going to name the place Boston. It's like, come on, guys. I mean, at least with Maryland, the dude that's trying to make a Catholic friendly colony, he's got St. Mary's St. Mary's City. It's like, okay, yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. You didn't leave from a St. Mary's City and you're making a new St. Mary's City. You're naming this after the Virgin Mary because Catholicism. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. And also Maryland because, again, the Virgin Mary. Also something they did here, they moved the Massachusetts Bay Company's capital and records to New England. set up commercial charter as the founding document for the colony. So rather than like having all the paperwork still in England and being, tied to what's going on there, they moved everything to their new colony. So essentially they had no ties back to Europe, which was quite a bold move. Like they had no legal ties back to Europe. They established a new kind of polity, which is to say voting rights. All adult males could vote on the governor, which is to say John Winthrop, who was a Puritan lawyer, deputy governor, and legislature. They still had a bad first winter because they're in Massachusetts. Come on. It's rough up there. But quickly they turned things around and were soon attracting thousands of immigrants. Oh yeah, here's everybody hanging out. And unlike what we saw with the Pilgrim's Landing, here's the Puritans. Look at all the ships, and they're just like unloading boxes and boxes and crates of stuff. Oh, I didn't notice this last time, so I wasn't able to mention this to my Tuesday, Thursday class. But this is something we're going to see a lot going forward. The children are like proportionally the same as the adults. Like, that just looks like a person that's just been squeezed down. Like, it doesn't look like a child, it just looks like a person that's just further back in the background, but not. It's weird. And just to show you how close they actually were, so there's Plymouth down here, and Boston ended up this way. And then it shows a bunch of the other settlements that cropped up eventually. You see Salem further up there. We'll get to that in actually a couple of chapters. Actually, after the first test, it's chapter 4 that we talk about Salem. Okay. So more stuff on the Puritans. Yeah, we should be able to finish this today. So they quickly spread beyond this close-knit community within Boston. So the legislature, which was known as the General Court, again, the legislator in each colony had a different name, but it's all the same, basic like House of Representatives / Senate, whatever you want to call it, like we have today in each state. So they had to develop policies on how to establish townships, make sure they each had a local church and school, because, if you're a Puritan, that's what you need. When I was in Ireland, and we were like taking the bus to different places, I noticed that each town, even like the villages, the little tiny places, they'd have a church, a pub, and a bookkeeper, usually all like on the same corner. So you could go to church, go get drunk, go make a bed, and then probably go back to the pub, all on the same street corner. So same idea here, I guess. Now, as we had seen down in Virginia, they made money with tobacco. In Massachusetts, you couldn't really grow tobacco, at least not like you could in Virginia. Maybe during the summer a little bit, but once it starts getting cold again, they're just going to get wiped out. However, off the coast of Massachusetts were huge shoals of codfish. Also, they exported lumber, wheat, rye, oats, pork, cheese, that sort of stuff. So, it's a type of grain. It's like wheat. And they would trade that with England for cloth, iron pots, and other such. And also Roman molasses from the West Indies, like we talked about last time. The two things that you make from the sugar in the West Indies. Hey, look, the Massachusetts tribe's back. So they were working with the natives in the region, in particular the Massachusetts tribe, because they had been forced out of where the Pilgrims were, and were now in the area where the Puritans were, and were much weaker and, I guess, easier to work with. So we had a lot of Puritan missionaries, in particular John Eliot, who tried to convert the natives, and they taught the natives how to read Bibles, and also some of these pupils went to Harvard College. That means the natives. Like, Harvard College was originally just like a missionary school. But like the Puritans were so hell-bent on converting the natives that they even had them going to the college they set up, which, I mean, considering all the racism and xenophobia of the day, that's pretty impressive. So back to John Eliot, he created these so-called praying towns. The Christian natives could live alongside the English to try to wean them off of their traditional ways, and also protect them from settlers who try to exploit them, because that happened a lot. But most of these so-called praying Indians tended to keep their traditions alongside Christian practices. Now, I just want to make a note on that. This isn't in the book. This is something that I learned in other courses that I've taken and taught. The thing about Native Americans, most Native Americans, I certainly can't paint them all with one brush, but most Native Americans, when it came to religion, it was very malleable, because a lot of the times the tribes would be at war, and if, say, Tribe A took over Tribe B, Tribe B Tribe B wouldn't get wiped out. They would just now be under the control of Tribe A and would have their customs now. But they wouldn't get rid of their gods. They would just include whatever gods Tribe A had. And typically Tribe A would also take whatever gods Tribe B had and include them in their pantheon. It would just grow. So when the Europeans came and it's like, hey, we have this religion we want to show you guys, the natives were like, okay, cool, we'll add that to the pile. And then when the Europeans got pissy about the natives still doing their traditional stuff, it's like, I don't understand what the problem is. We're doing your stuff as well. We just got our stuff like we always have. So they didn't understand the problem, because for them it wasn't a problem. It was just like, add it to the pile. So that's what that was about. It wasn't like they were, secretly doing the pagan rituals because they were trying to outsmart the Christians. Like, it was just, for them it was all the same. Like, they were sincerely like, okay, cool, this Christian stuff, it's different, but no different than any of the other tribes were around. So cool, we'll throw it on the pile and work it into what we're doing. So anyway, here we have the Puritans working with the Massachusetts tribe. Again, the totally just regular tobacco pipe. There's John Eliot hanging out with the natives.
Like how they make the children grown up, but they're just, they're almost older.
Yeah, exactly. Because, children typically have, like, larger heads in proportion to their body than adults do, because that's just how our biology works. But in these drawings, they're just adults, but squished down. At least the baby's got a big head. But yeah, like the kid, especially on the far right, it's just a shrunk down adult. I don't know what happened with my thing there, but now we've got squares. So, the Puritan worldview, and this is going to be a major part of, well, again, the rest of the chapter. They saw everything as outward signs of God's punishment or blessings, not only on people, but on entire countries. Like I said, they were, anything that happened in England was God being angry. And again, they were firm believers in Calvinism. Actually, when I was teaching this yesterday, I hadn't gone through my notes prior to teaching this again since last year. And I was like, I think it's Calvinism. Like, that would be my guess, but I'm not sure. And then I got to this slide. I was like, oh, yeah, it's Calvinism. So, yeah, this idea of predestination. Anyone who would go to heaven was decided from creation by God. And any who were chosen by God will be seen as benevolent, virtuous, and successful. So, like, if you've got two people, one chosen by God and one not, and they both were doing the same thing, the one chosen by God would be successful, the one not chosen by God would have, disasters and stuff happen to them, which is pretty awful. There's, like, no sympathy in this worldview. Like, oh, your whole family died, and, like, a tornado went through your farm and murdered all your animals, and now you're destitute? Well, I guess God hates you. I guess they didn't read Job? Like, I don't know. I'm saying, it's like, I was raised on a lot of Bible stuff, so I have questions about some of these views. Anyway, any events were signs of God's hand in the world, eclipses and comets to deformed births, and not just like human children, but like animals. And since there was constantly livestock being born, you'd occasionally have deformed like goats or cows or whatever. Let me read this one from the book. So, when a smallpox epidemic killed several thousand Massachusetts natives in 1633 to 34, a Puritan town council observed, "Without this remarkable and terrible stroke of God upon the native, we would with much more difficulty have found room, and at far greater charge, have obtained and purchased land." In other words, hey, God wiped out a bunch of natives that we are technically allied with, but now we can get this land much cheaper. Thanks, God. These people that they had been trying to convert, so not just like a tribe that they're getting along with because they kind of have to, but a tribe of people that they had been converting and actually building a pretty decent relationship with. It's like, oh, well, the land was expensive and God murdered them, so now we don't have to pay for it. The leaders themselves were typically devout Puritans, which you sort of had to be a leader in this society. You couldn't exactly be like, oh, well, I'm not a Puritan. It's like, well, get the hell out then. So, in the short run, it led to unity among those who were adherent to Puritan ideals, but if you disagreed with any kind of governmental decision, you were seen as dissenting with Puritan ideals and therefore the entire society. Like I said to my Tuesday, Thursday class, I don't want to say cult, but you know, when you run an entire society based on religion, it gets problematic very quickly. Anyway, this is one of my favorite newspaper clippings that I found. Heaven's alarm to the world, or a sermon wherein is shewed that frightful sights and signs in heaven are the presages of great calamity is at hand, preached at the yada yada yada. The best part of this, though, the dude's name, Mr. Increase Mather. His first name is Increase. Don't worry, he named his son something normal. His son's name is Cotton. Cotton Mather is going to become actually very important. I'm not just making this up for a joke. Cotton Mather is extremely important in the following chapters. But the dude's name's Increase. What? I don't even. Like, I know a lot of these groups like would have biblical-based names. I mean, that's still a thing even today, but like, I don't know where Increase came from. What? I don't think that meant anything different back then. So, of course, we have those that didn't agree with the Puritan authority. So let's see what that was about. So Roger Williams, a minister from Salem, considered the Puritan leaders not Puritan enough. Oh. Okay. He believed they had not rejected enough of the Church of England, and some Puritan leaders were not saints. That's the term for people chosen by God to go to heaven. And he felt like some of the Puritan leaders weren't being shown as chosen by God, because apparently you can just see that, I guess. They didn't appreciate this and kicked him out of Massachusetts Bay Colony. So he and his followers went south and founded Providence, because that's also a very religious-y name. And then what would eventually become Rhode Island Colony. Now, I will give the dude this. He named the new city he went to Providence, and not like Salem 2 Electric Boogaloo. So I'll give Roger Williams that. Also, though, I need to do more research on Roger Williams, because the reason this dude got kicked out of Massachusetts Bay is he said that the Puritan leaders were not Puritan enough. So that means they should have been more hardline, I guess. That's what I imagine, right? But in this new colony he's made, he taught that you have to accept even those who would not be saved. So they accepted Quakers, Baptists, and Jews, and insisted on separation of church and state. I mean, great, but that doesn't follow from you guys aren't being Puritan enough. That's weird. I don't know. Dude's interesting. He also worked closely with Narragansetts. They traded and peacefully transferred land. So again, Roger Williams is a pretty decent dude. You know, for a colonizer. We also have Anne Hutchinson. She's one of the more famous of these dissenters because she was a woman. She was kicked out of Massachusetts Bay Colony and joined up with Rhode Island, had been put on trial for sedition. So sedition meaning trying to overthrow the government. She challenged the colonial leaders and thus the Puritans. And the whole reason for this wasn't like her saying they weren't Puritan enough, like Roger Williams did, which was literally challenging their authority. She claimed she had a, quote, immediate revelation from God, which is to say she believed God was speaking to her. Which, you know, when you're living in the backwoods of Massachusetts Bay, who knows what you're going to be hearing. Puritan leaders saw this as heretical because in the Puritan church and most churches at the time and still a lot of churches today, only men were allowed to be called by God because reasons, I guess. Only men were allowed to hear voices in their head. So yeah, compared to Roger Williams, who again had made a really direct claim about the authority of these dudes, and Hutchinson was just like, hey, I hear a thing. Like, oh, she's trying to take over. It's like, no, I just got an opinion, guys. Sorry. Oh, that's too much. She was a threat not only because of religious beliefs, but because she was a woman. She had lady parts. So yeah, there was not just the social hierarchy of you have to listen to the Puritan leaders, but also the gender hierarchy of how dare a woman speak, basically. And in Puritan authority, you know, the gender hierarchy and the Puritan authority were the same thing. Also got this great image of Roger Williams hanging out with the natives, like stepping off of the boat, and they're like, hey, here, have this pipe. It totally won't make you fall in the water. I know a lot of the images of the colonists, like having friendly relations with the natives, are just propaganda to make them look better than they were. But I still like seeing it because it feels better than what was actually going on. I hope Roger Williams was as good as most basic history says he was, because he's like a decent guy. I don't know. Also, it might also be because I spent 2 years in Providence, Rhode Island, getting my master's degree, and well, Providence, Rhode Island was all right. Speaking of which, here's Providence, Rhode Island. It was all right. Here's Anne Hutchinson. If looks could kill, everyone in that room will be dead. And then she'd be in trouble for a lot more. And I don't know why, but here she is making a free throw, I guess. And here they are, like, marching her out of Massachusetts Bay Colony under guard, because, you know, she's dangerous. She says words. All right. So before it gets too much later, we have a couple of wars to talk about. Both in Old England and New England. So the Pequot tribe had been allies with the English for several years, but both the Puritans and Pilgrims were concerned about the threat of this tribe. Because, you know, let's preemptively murder our allies in case they get strong. So there was 2 Englishmen who died in 1636. Let me see what the book says about this. Yeah, it just says using the death of 2 Englishmen to justify military expedition. So they worked with the Darringassets, remember the ones that Roger William had befriended. They fought and eventually defeated the tribe in 1637, thus ending this Pequot War. Over in England, though, boy, we had ourselves a thing. Parliament and King Charles I had themselves a civil war. The parliamentarians won, led by the Puritan Oliver Cromwell. who, if you are Irish, you have to spit. You apparently have to spit on the floor after you say his name because he was a piece of shit in Ireland. Which is to say, like, he genocided a lot of Irish cities. Yeah, he was a bit of a monster. So with a Puritan in charge of England, also they regicided King Charles I. Dude got the heads in sacks. So, many of the rituals and ceremonies that were holdovers from Catholicism were gotten rid of. So this is when Anglicanism actually became its own thing, and not just like what if Catholicism but not the Pope. That's all Anglicanism was at first. So Cromwell was a military dictator until he died, and then his son tried to take over, and his son was garbage, and they were just like, okay, we're going to get a king again. So they brought Charles' son, Charles II, again, very creative naming there, good work, England, to the throne in 1660, and the Puritans no longer had control over England, and so they began moving to North America in greater numbers. That's the whole point of this from American standpoint, is they started moving back to America in greater numbers. And also, while all this was happening, while Britain's having a civil war, well, England, not Britain, it's different. Don't worry about it. I'm going to worry about it. Y'all don't have to worry about it. The colonies in North America were continuing to grow without any kind of oversight, which is the start and really the end point, as we're going to see going forward, of what led to the push for independence. It wasn't really like any major event. I know it was like, oh, taxation without representation. It's like, yeah, well, most of the English colonies dealt with that. It's just that North America was left alone for so long, we were used to doing things our own way. So once the king came back to power, New Amsterdam was taken from the Dutch, made into New York, which increased England's hold over North America. So here we have the Pequot War, you know, the good civil English murdering the natives, as they did. Can have some more of that later on. Oh, this one's actually in the book. This is an unusual top-down look at, let's see, what's it called? A Pequot Fort at Mystic, Connecticut. Claimed 400 Pequots were killed in the short but bloody battle. So this is showing like the fort being surrounded by the English and their native allies. So I believe this is Charles I and his royalist allies. And then bloody Cromwell. And then Charles II coming back. They're like, hey, thanks for, not taking the whole murdering your father thing too seriously there, Charles. However, the wars aren't done yet because we have King Philip's War. There's still plenty of native tribes not especially happy with the English settlers. So we had King Philip's War, which was apparently the English name for the Wampanoag chief Metacom. I don't know where they got King Philip from Metacom. Again, English are freaking weird, y'all. So the Wampanoag, Narragansett, and Nipmuc natives against the English and their allies, Mohawks, Pequots, Mohegans, and the praying Indians, which is, say, the Christian Wampanoags. Interesting thing to note here, if you recall the previous war, not the Civil War, the Native American War, they were fighting the Pequots, and now the Pequots are fighting with the English. Also, their main ally in the Pequot War were the Narragansetts, and there's the Narragansetts on the Wampanoag side. So, a lot of interesting shifting alliances there. This was a very long, very brutal war. Keep this in mind because we're going to have an even worse one going forward. 18 New England towns were burned down. Plymouth and Providence were attacked. Metacom's forces got within 20 miles of Boston. This was not a little fight in the brush with a couple of frontier homesteads getting attacked. This was a serious war. Now, of course, the natives on both sides, which is to say the allies of the English and the natives they were fighting, lost over a quarter of their population in the course of a year. Eventually, Metacom's forces ran low on guns and powder, and the Mohawks ambushed and killed Metacom. You don't mess with the Mohawks. They're like the special forces when it comes to natives. If you're on the wrong side of the Mohawks and you're just like in the woods around them, you're probably already dead. Many of the remaining natives fled north to ally with the French because, you know, as the saying goes, hey, you hate the English too, let's be friends. That's the saying in Europe. It's like, oh, you also hate the English? Cool. So, the Iroquois leaders met with the colonists in Albany to set up the so-called covenant chain to try to forestall any future conflict. It wouldn't last, but this was an attempt. So here we have some of the arson going on. There's a larger settlement being burned. And here's actually the map of the offensives and the movements and the various attacks. I mean, the whole region was a battlefield, which is hard to imagine when you think, you know, New England. You don't really think too much of any of this. Even the Civil War, they never got that far north. This is the closest thing I could find for the covenant chain. I couldn't find any, like, folks sitting around a council thing. All right. So the conclusion for this chapter, and we can at least start the next one, so I can definitely put this one up on Blackboard. So by the time John Smith had died in 1631, colonies were still being established. The English could not be conquistadors like the Spanish and just roll in and take gold. There was no gold to take. So if they wanted a North American empire, they had to make settlements and grow crops, settle a lot of land, which is going to make problems with the natives. And again, there were issues of how to deal with the natives. Early English settlers were as aggressive as the Spanish, if they could be. Others tried to work out alliances, if they could. But with the English, it was like based on the situation. Typically, the French were a little more reliable when it came to making an alliance than the English were. With the Spanish, you just didn't. Still, of course, we had cycles of conflict. European-born diseases weren't didn't just go away. This wasn't like, okay, this isn't a thing anymore. There were still smallpox and other diseases from Europe wiping the natives out in huge numbers. And of course, with all this land and the need for labor, they brought in yet another continent, Africa, for the labor to work it. So, we've got 15 minutes left. Let's at least start the next chapter. That is my stupid cats folder. Whoops, wrong one. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. Chapter 3. Oh, I forgot to bring this up before. And like two of you had asked me, and I meant to say this at the start of class. The first test will be after we finish chapter 3. So we've got like at least a week. I mean, today's Wednesday, so I don't see us finishing this next week. If we finish it, it'll be like next Wednesday, so then the test would have to be the following week. The way I'm going to do this, rather than putting the PowerPoint on Blackboard when we finish the chapter, because that won't give you much time to look it over, I'll put the chapter up as we get near like the middle point of the chapter. So that'll probably be like Monday. I'll put the PowerPoint up, as well as the study guide. I've made a study guide based directly off of the test. Actually, the way it's looking, since we're just going to get started today, go over maybe a slide or two. We'll definitely get to the halfway point on Monday. We'll probably finish on Wednesday, and we should have extra time at the end of the chapter, the end of the day on Wednesday, to go over any questions you guys have on the study guide. So look over the study guide that I put up on Monday, and bring any questions you have on Wednesday, because we're probably not going to have time to go over the entire thing from top to bottom. But the study guide is based directly off of the test. It's not just like I've pulled some random questions that may or may not be based on the test. I made the test for the PowerPoints, and then I made the study guide from the test. I'm not playing tricks on anybody. Anyway, let's get a little bit further, and then I'm going to be done because I'm tired. This is chapter 3. Let's at least get it started. We're going to repeat the 1680 to 1750 thing a couple of times because it's an important period of time right before we start getting into, issues with North America. So, Charles II was in power. He gave his allies in America lots of land. James, Duke of York, his brother, got New York. Again, fantastic naming. Lands were given to investors to create East and West Jersey because, of course, there's an area in England called Jersey. Paid his debt to Admiral Sir William Penn by giving his son large tracts of land, which would be called Pennsylvania, because, again, naming. William Penn Jr. Eventually became a Quaker. He used this land as a refuge for this Protestant sect because Quakers were new and different, therefore persecuted. Because 1600s, I guess. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of this up is, well, for one, William Penn Jr. is important. But also, all of these groups are proprietary colonies. Basically, the aristocrats that were given this land as like payment for debts or because nepotism, could really do what they wanted. Like, hey, do you want to make this an aristocratic colony? Sure, do what you want. Oh, you want to make this a colony that lets Quakers do what they want? Yeah, I don't care. Go for it. So these proprietary colonies could kind of do whatever. However, local conditions, such as the Bacon Rebellion, or Bacon's Rebellion, I don't think the Bacon Rebellion is the right format. Basically, how people felt could only allow them to do so much. You couldn't go full feudalism because the people would kill you. And as we mentioned, Southern Carolina was an offshoot of Barbados, heavy slave labor, swamp plantations, trading with West Indies. So Southern Carolina was kind of well, again, Carolina was its own, was a single colony. But the southern portion wasn't really a North American colony, at least the way it was made. It was like a Caribbean colony at first. So we have East and West Jersey. That's apparently still kind of a thing in New Jersey. Like they're very aware of the geographical differences between East and West Jersey. I don't know, Jersey's weird. Here's how the colonies were split up early on, which is, I don't know, New York looks like a liver or something. All the colonies over here were just all considered New England. Also, Nova Scotia was literally a Scottish colony there for a while before Scotland was incorporated into England. Also, while looking up pictures of William Penn Jr., the third one was like the Quaker Oats guy, because it's literally him. It's literally William Penn Jr. Another weird map, it's Pennsylvania, but from the east. Because you've got the Delaware River here, and West New Jersey down this way, because this way's to the east. West New Jersey is to the east. Don't worry about it. But you do see, like, they've got grid roads and whatnot, like grid patterned roads, which compared to, like, say, Boston, which built all their roads based on old cattle paths, to this day, and is one of the worst cities I've ever been to in terms of roads. Don't drive to Boston if you can help it. I've driven through Boston. It's bad. They have horrible roads. Yeah. Pennsylvania, at least, again, has grids. Yeah, some of them. And here they are, like, setting up the roads, laying out the streets, it says here. And again, working with the natives. Here we go. This is the original Carolina colony. And South Carolina was where Georgia is today. And even says down here, the south bounds of Carolina, according to the last charter. It's like, I don't think the Spanish would appreciate that. So this was just kind of this is what we claim, but nobody's going down there because the Spanish would shoot us. All right, we'll talk about the other stuff next time. So y'all have a good weekend. Online folks, I'll get a discussion thing up later. So I'm going to mute this. I'll talk to you guys in a minute. back to y'all real quick before I go to my last class. Pull this up again. Yeah, so as I told them, next Monday I will put up the this chapter as well as the study guide. Excuse me. And then on Wednesday we should finish this chapter. And we'll go over the study guide, so, be prepared for that. And the following Monday, we'll take our test, and I'm still not 100% sure what that's going to look like. So I'm going to need to work on that this weekend. So, you guys still have, more than a week before that's a thing, so don't worry about it. If you've got questions, you can email me, but we'll figure it out. So, yeah, that's today, and I'll see you guys later on. Where's my thing? There we go. Okay. It says the stream spit rate's lower than blah blah blah. It's fine. Okay. Catch you guys later on, and have a good weekend. I'll put the discussion up later. It's going to be another what new things you learned this week.